we love villains so much? Maybe because they are simply hot. And just because heroes save the day doesn't mean they're the only ones who deserve love. I mean, there is a whole story in Marvel Voices Pride from 2022 about Loki being one of the biggest flirts of the Marvel universe, where Loki is confronted by and has to deal with all of his exes. Loki, the god of stories and former trickster god, has always been a smooth talker since the days of Norse mythology. He's been convincing gods, humans, and all manner of creatures to hook up with him. His romantic love interests have included giantess Angerboda, Enchantress, his first love Leah, and of course in the MCU, his alternate female self Sylvie, just to name a few. When it comes to the biggest flirt in all of comics, who do you think that would be? I can actually think of a few other people that are not on this list, and I'm curious to see if what you're thinking is what I'm thinking. Moving on, I feel like this list would not be complete without Harley Quinn. She has to be one of the most sexualized characters in all of comics, and also is a character who very much leans into, I would say, that side of herself. It's actually one of the things I really like about her, to be honest. Despite being overly objectified, I'd say, she at least gets some agency in how she's depicted in terms of like her as a character. And what's more, her main squeeze Ivy has often been shown accepting Harley's more polyamorous tendencies. Harley Quinn has been paired up with the Joker, Poison Ivy, Deadshot, Catwoman, Red Tool, Batman, Booster Gold, weirdly, and even Lobo. She also once found herself attracted to an alternate version of herself. It makes sense to me that Harley would have so many loves, considering that she is a really friendly person who tends to connect pretty easily with people, and who, while sometimes annoying, is also undeniably easy to love as well. Look, I'm gonna be real with you about this next one. I don't know all of Umar's relationship history, as she doesn't appear as often as a villain as her brother Dormammu does, and I feel like she doesn't like get into all of it as much, but I'm just going to guess that she has a long list of people she has been attached to, just based on what I do know, what she has told us of her relationship history. Even if we don't fully know about all of these people yet, I think there are more that exist than we know of. Why do I think this? Because of the way Umar ogled and treated the Hulk, and during that interaction, her reference to her extensive experience in regards to the intimacy department. What we also do know is that Umar had Cleo with Orny and was at one point married to Tyboro, so, you know, we at least got 3 people there, and just like I said, her energy gives me that vibe. I would not have expected to include this next villain on a list like this, but he actually has so many children. And I'm pretty sure all, or if not all, at least most of them have actually different moms. We're talking about the one, the only, the new god, Darkseid. I just introduced him like he was about to like jump into a wrestling match, which might be appropriate in some ways. After all, Darkseid may have been in quite a few wrestling matches of a certain nature, if you catch my meaning. Darkseid has been romantically attached to Sully, his one great love, and he's also been intimately linked to Tigra, Myrna, and in what I hope was an Elseworld story, Granny Goodness. Yeah. That was messed up for so many reasons. Someone else that might be a surprising addition for you, Lex Luthor. Surprisingly, Lex is very much a ladies' man in the comics. There are a lot of people he's been attached to over the years. I mean, I guess it makes sense. He is insanely smart, and he's also a billionaire or a millionaire. I think he's a billionaire at this point. Sure, he's a villain, but he's also an intellectual. And even as a villain, Lex often does what he does because he thinks it's the right move. He thinks he's actually helping people, even though he's a villain. You know what I mean? At least in the modern day comics, he's not, like, I would say, as petty in his villainy, or, you know, he's less petty than he was during the Golden Age anyway. Throughout his history and various appearances, he's been linked to Ardrora, once his wife and the mother of his son, the ancient Contessa Erica Alexandra del Portenza, Mercy Graves, Lois Lane, Lana Lang, and even a version of Supergirl, which is a whole weird story that I will save for another time. Honestly, it's a pretty good weird story though, it's very bizarre. Speaking of unexpected ladies' men, Magneto for some reason has gone on to become one of the hottest male villains we have at Marvel Comics. Like if there was a hottest male villains of the year list like in a magazine, I'm sure he'd have topped it many times over at this point. Also, if that doesn't exist, we should honestly make it a thing. I would love to do a yearly like hottest villain list. Honestly, it sounds really fun. What makes Magneto so attractive though? Perhaps his sometimes stoicism, or his determination, his power, or his ability to wear red and purple together at the same time, and somehow pull that off. Either way, he's a babe magnet in the Marvel Comics universe. Magneto has been paired with some of the greatest hotties of comic book history, including Mystique, Rogue, Wasp, and Magda, to name a few. Also, if you don't think Magda is insanely hot, just check out her Ultimate Comics version. Yeah, wow. He even at one point stole a love interest from the X-Men Cyclops. No, not Jean or Emma, but the lesser known and very human Captain Lee Forrester. The next one is probably more expected considering where her powers kind of come from. Carol is a Violet Lantern, so of course she has to make our cut here. Violet Lanterns represent feelings of love on the emotional spectrum, and Carol Ferris is one of the most iconic among them, so this list simply would honestly just feel incomplete without her. Star Sapphire isn't always a villain, of course, but she did start out as one in the comics. Also starting out as Hal Jordan's boss turned love interest turned villain. Carol has had many love interests over the years, including Green Lantern Hal Jordan, Hector Hammond pre-Crisis, Gil, Green Lantern Kyle Rayner, yeah, that was a weird one, and more recently in the comics, Nathan. Just Nathan. Though really, her tried and true love that she always comes back to is of course Hal Jordan. And for Hal, I'd say his tried and true is Carol. Though them ending up together long term always tends to feel like an uphill battle, tragically. Like Star Sapphire, Enchantress is also obsessed with romance. More specifically, she's more interested in making sure everyone loves her. She once tried to destroy Dazzler just because her singing voice was preferred to Amora's. Yeah. There's a reason I feel like Enchantress wears green, you know what I'm saying? Enchantress was also made to be the apple of everyone's eye. She is considered to be the perfect feminine form. So when men don't fall head over heels for her immediately, I can imagine it's very confusing for her. In some cases though, even the men who do fall in love with Enchantress get punished for doing so, being turned into trees for their trouble when she tires of her suitors, so that they will always be reaching out for her, worshipping her beauty forevermore. Amora has been romantically linked to Braggy, Thor and his Donald Blake persona, Loki, Scourge, and her creation, the Keep. Another somewhat surprising entry, but likely not the most surprising villain on our list? I don't think so anyways. We're talking about Deathstroke. Well, you might think of Deathstroke as someone who is too busy working as a mercenary or an assassin to get busy, or who's simply too serious to get romantic with people. His track record says otherwise. He originally was with his wife, now ex-wife, Adeline Kane, who is also the mother of both Grant and Joseph, his two sons. But he also had his daughter, Rose, with Lillian Worth. Intimately, he's been linked to the female vigilante, Patricia Trace, his part-time partner and part-time lover, Angelica, Talia al Ghul as well, yeah, his son Joseph's fiance, no I'm not kidding, Etienne, and extremely controversially, Tara. One that he denies, but I'm not fully convinced on that one. And finally, one which felt like a no-brainer for me, Mystique has to be the most romantically involved villain around. I was really trying to think of who has had the most partners, and when I was cycling through villains in my mind and I came upon Mystique, I thought, that's it, that's the one. That's who's the top of the list. The thing about Mystique is that, like Wolverine, someone who she also happens to be romantically linked to, she's been around for a very, very long time. And usually when you're, around for that long, you tend to have a lot of exes. Mystique even more so than some others because she tends to manipulate people by getting close to them, kind of weaponizing intimacy in some cases, and as a result of that, and as a result of what I would say is fear of getting too close to people and kind of not trusting them, she definitely has some intimacy issues. Her relationships tend to be short-lived in most cases, although there are a few exceptions there. Mystique's long list of lovers includes her wife, Destiny, Wolverine, Azazel, Sabretooth, Magneto, Professor X, and even Deadpool. Yep, she was briefly married to Deadpool. It was a thing. That's about it. I'm your host, Amanda McKnight, and until next time, you stay nerdy, YouTube. Bye!